Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Our speaker today is John Cramutola, Corporate Director of Culinary at Cura Hospitality. At this time, all lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Type your question using the question prompt at the top of the screen. They'll be answered in the order they were received. When typing your questions, please identify the name of your organization at the beginning of your entry. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the CIHQ YouTube library within a few days. It's now my pleasure to turn the conference over to our presenter, John Cramutola. John, you have the floor.
Thank you. Much appreciated, and good afternoon to everybody. So first and foremost, it's my pleasure to present to you today the CIHQ Partner webinar series. And so today, well, first, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is John Cramutola. I am the Director of Culinary for Cura Hospitality. I've been with the company for a few years now, and a large part of what I do on a daily basis is help with policy and procedure, training, developing the culinary culture of the company, while also coordinating support efforts for our many locations throughout the country. And so our agenda for today ultimately is to really talk about how we can cultivate learning. And through that learning cultivation, how are we going to apply techniques and strategies to get there? And then finally, just a summary around how doing all these processes can affect both, patient outcomes, regulatory impact, and ultimately how we bring all of that together. So today we're going to be talking about engaging food and nutrition teams in skill development. So this is strategies that we use for healthcare organizations, and this can span across, I think it's important to mention this, that it can span across acute care, it can be rehabilitation, it could be long-term care, continuing care, or behavioral health. It really, this works across multiple avenues within our healthcare organizations. And so some of our learning objectives for today, we're going to learn how to cultivate a learning culture. How do we get to the point where we can understand that importance of continuous skill development in our food and nutrition roles, and how do we enhance those dining experiences? How do we practically apply those techniques for effective service training? And this isn't just for back of house, this goes for front of house. And ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, they are symbiotic in nature. Front of house affects back of house and vice versa. So how do we get this into daily operational integration into our food, into the nutritional department for our dining team members? And ultimately, how do we engage them with the location and with the folks that are end user, right? Our patients or our residents. How do we implement those strategies to create a supportive learning environment? How do we get to the point where we can share knowledge amongst our peers, along with recognition for team members, in their achievements and even on their day-to-day successes. And then finally, we can learn how to cultivate a learning culture and a culture of recognition, and how that can enhance our food and our nutrition regulatory program, which coincides with the overall food program to begin with, right? So we'll start with communication. Why does it matter? So we'll start with a couple of the higher level pieces of communication. So there's clarity. So we have to ensure that everyone understands what it is that we are trying to get across when we communicate. Ultimately, you can't necessarily expect a person to meet your expectations, right, or your goals, unless you explain what those expectations are. What are those goals, and what are the responsibilities around those goals? And in that, you have to be consistent. So that really helps to reinforce the standards. It helps to reinforce processes. It could be culinary techniques, and in the broader sense, it could be really anything that affects the process throughout the day. So, if you have a message today and that message is entirely different tomorrow, that can get confusing. So we have to be consistent in how we reinforce those standards, how we reinforce those processes. And then finally, trust. So if you have clarity, if you have consistency, and you're transparent, you build trust, and trust builds confidence in leadership, and it fosters a sense of belonging for the team member themselves. So if they trust in you, if they understand the why, they understand the expectation, there is a higher likelihood that they're going to feel they're going to belong to the team. They're going to have some ownership of what it is they do on a day-to-day basis. So communication, some elements with this. So I think this is important to discuss because, it's not just somebody talking to someone and somebody saying, okay, I heard you, right? It's kind of a symbiotic relationship. It's circular. So as I'm talking to you, right, I'm sending the message out there. Now it's my responsibility to make sure that there's clarity, make sure there's consistency, make sure that I'm as transparent as possible. But as the receiver, it's our job to actively listen to what the sender is saying. Now, if there is a breakdown on either side, ultimately the message gets lost. And so it's important to understand that as the person sending out that message, very important that we follow those key kind of rules in terms of communicating it out. But it's also important that we, as receivers of that message, we actively take the time to listen to it and absorb it the way we should be. And so some benefits of effective communication, right? So it encourages feedback. If you're consistently getting that communication out there and you ultimately create that safe space, the staff that you're working with or the people that you're helping to lead, they're going to feel comfortable sharing ideas. They're going to feel comfortable sharing the challenges they may have. Ultimately, it's kind of like an open door policy. You're willing to be frank and consistent in communication with them. In return, they're going to feel the ability to be able to communicate openly with you. And it also promotes learning. So the more we talk, the more we effectively communicate, the more we can facilitate the exchange of knowledge and skills among our team members, right? So if we're talking about something as simple as knife skills when we're talking to our culinarians, if we exchange that knowledge and we have that open dialogue, there's a chance for them to take that information and openly communicate that to somebody that wasn't necessarily there in the moment, or perhaps through a training exercise for a new employee. And ultimately, it strengthens collaboration. So if everybody's open and everybody's aligned on the team and they understand the why and they have been communicated to clearly and consistently, all of a sudden we have a shared objective. We begin to understand the goals and we do what we can to work toward that end game together, right? And those objectives and daily priorities become shared objectives and daily priorities versus just a singular point of view. It's the entire team working toward the same end. So some key communication strategies. Daily huddles, I think, are probably going to be one of the most important things that we can do, because a daily huddle is designed effectively to every single day provide a briefing of the state of the department. It's like a mini State of the Union address for the department. And these are kind of things that we can discuss goals. How do we align to those goals? There could be updates that we have to discuss. From a culinary perspective, we might be out of a certain product, and so what are we 86 on that day, right? And it's those kind of things that you communicate out. But once again, it's reciprocal. So you're communicating out, but your team is communicating back to you. Active listening. Now, I kind of already touched on this, but when we're listening, when we're taking the time to listen to a team member, for example, and it's not necessarily always a pleasant conversation. This could be something that's perhaps a learning moment or a corrective action. When we are taking the moment to hear what they have to say, we have to actively do what we can to be completely and 100% involved in that conversation. So if it's 5 minutes that we set aside, then take that 5 minutes and truly dedicate it to the moment so that you can actively listen. Another piece of actively listening that's really important that I think a lot of us sometimes can miss is we often will be listening to somebody, and while we're listening to them, we're actively developing our response to what it is that they're saying. And that, at the end of the day, by definition, isn't active listening. What we should do is take a step back, hear what they have to say, take it all in, absorb it, and then develop the response that we need to respond, and whatever might be appropriate in the moment. But we at least want to give them that moment to let them speak and for us to absorb it entirely. Visual tools is another thing that's very important. So using boards on a wall, could be safety boards, it could be recognition boards, different charts or demonstrations, and it just helps to enhance clarity. Some folks are, they can read a book or a lesson and know it right away. Some people need hands-on training, and other folks are just visual, and they can look at something that's visual and get what they need to get out of it. So you need to kind of apply every single way. Have that open door policy. Make sure that your staff and your team is aware that they can talk with you whenever they need to. And it's true that we have busy days, as certainly as managers, as leaders. There are going to be times when we don't have that exact moment available, but taking the moment to acknowledge that they have the concern and scheduling a time with them is very important. So you just don't kind of brush it off, or you don't rush through it and say, okay, yeah, I'll follow up at some point. Hear what they have to say. And if it's not something that can be addressed in the moment, schedule a time when it can be addressed and follow up accordingly. Celebrate successes. This is a big one. So you think about a larger location that may have, and I can actually go back into my old world. I was at a hospital that had 1,000 beds, had almost 300 employees. And it's very easy when you're that busy and you got so much going on, it's very easy for a lot of negative things to be happening at once. You could easily, if you're doing an audit or some type of review, you can easily spot a lot of things going wrong. The issue with that is, if we just focus on that, is we're ignoring all of the things that are going right. And, if you have 1,000 individual things going on at any given moment and 995 of them are going right, I think it's fair to say that we're in general successful. So let's go ahead and take a moment to celebrate those successes instead of just focusing on the negatives. There is learning to be done from both. And then varying the communication tool. Some people respond really well one-on-one. Some folks respond really well via text, some via email, some through the intranet, some through like instant messaging services. We have to understand how that communication tool is going to work for the people that we're communicating with. In addition to that, and this is something I learned years ago when I was going to multiple sales seminars, is you can hear a smile through the phone. And I think it's the same thing with any kind of non-one-on-one direct communication. It's how you conduct yourself beyond just the words that you're using. And so if you have to be very cognizant of the tone when you're sending an email out or you're sending a text out. Understand that these tools are vital. They're important. They're a part of what we do every single day, but also be aware that the tone can easily get misconstrued if we're not careful on how we use these tools. So a couple bits of communication that I think are important to talk about. And the first one is the rule of 7. So a message needs to be heard 7 times before it is retained. That's just what it is. Studies show that it takes a while. And so that's where the consistency and the repetition comes in. So if you have a particular standard that you're trying to set, or a particular culture that you're trying to set, you have to repeat. And it's okay to repeat as long as it's consistent and it's and it's in a respectful way that you're repeating it, right? But you need to make sure that that message is heard multiple times before it is retained. And then we move on to the 738-55 rule. So, and to me, this is a relatively shocking number, but 7% of what we say is a part of communication. So the words that are coming out of my mouth right now as I'm giving this presentation, they're important. It matters, but it's what kind of tonality am I adding to it? What kind of intonation is there? How is my body reacting to it? How am I engaging in the conversation? If I was to just start kind of talking like this and just get very monotone and very bored with the process, you might not be convinced that I have any passion around this. But because I do care about what I'm talking about, I think it shows in the way I'm talking, and it's the way I'm presenting the material. So that's where tone comes in. Now that's 38% of how we communicate. The next piece is 55% body language. So that's quite a bit, right? If you're sitting to someone and you're giving in front of them and you're giving them positive feedback, but your arms are crossed and you're at a generally, antagonizing stance, it might give confusing mixed signals, right? And so body language is important. If what you have to say is important and you think it matters, then allow the proper body language to go with it so that people will hear it, they will see it, and they will engage with it. As I sit here, I'm ahead on a screen right now, so you don't see too much body language, but the hope is that if you can see me, you can see that I'm engaged in the process, and I'm not just kind of floating my way through it. I'm trying to be as engaged as possible and give the information in the most clear way that I can. So moving on to daily huddles, and this is kind of going back to a piece of what we talked about, but it's because they're so important. They matter. Daily huddles truly, truly matter, right? So there's connection, there's communication, and there's collaboration through a daily huddle. So fostering stronger relationships between the team members and leadership. That's the first piece, right? So as we're talking as leaders through a daily huddle, we're conveying a message. We're hopefully conveying positivity. We're conveying all the information we need to convey, and we're communicating it clearly. But in that process, the team is listening. And if you are being upfront with them, if you're being transparent, you're giving them the information and the ability to be a part of the process versus just kind of handing rules from on high. Before you know it, there's a relationship that develops between leadership and the team members. So the communication, this is where you get a chance to share important updates, you address particular concerns, you ensure alignment on daily goals. And so, a particular concern could be, you did a walkthrough yesterday and you noticed that people weren't wearing non-slip shoes. And so here's your chance to have a conversation around that and make sure that the requirement is communicated. Make sure that they're aware as to why it's important, and that it's not just some step that the company just requires you to make, but it's an actual protection measure for them as well as the company, right? It's those kinds of things that you can communicate out. And then the final piece, collaboration. This creates a culture of teamwork. Now, let's say during this conversation, when we're mentioning the non-slip shoes, right? We have a team member that feels empowered to say what their concern is, and they say, "Well, the non-slip shoes are very expensive, and I don't know where I can find a really good pair at an affordable price." Well, now we have a chance to address that concern, and because these resources exist out there, if we find them the ability to get a pair of shoes at an affordable price that they can afford, that's going to protect them on a day-to-day basis, we have developed collaboration. We work together to figure out a problem. We've also developed trust because we now went out of our way to make sure that they're protected, and they know that. And that's all through the collaboration and the conversation of a daily huddle. So some benefits: focus on skill building. So these are short focus sessions, right? And this could be, knife skills, right? How do we reinforce techniques? How do we reinforce those standards? And how do we reinforce best practices? There's also real-time feedback. And this is, I think, very, very important, and sometimes can very easily get forgotten. But, if we see a challenge, whatever that might be, we have the ability, if we have these daily huddles, we have the ability to address it before it becomes a real concern or a real problem. And as we know, I think being proactive in this industry is infinitely better than being reactive. And then also it gives us a chance to celebrate wins immediately. If somebody does a fantastic job or gets a compliment from a patient or a resident, and we don't compliment it in the moment and we wait, several weeks, it loses a lot of its effect, right? And so we want to celebrate those wins immediately or as soon as we can. And daily huddles will give you that opportunity. And then there's cross-training opportunities. I think that in our post-COVID world and now many years out, we all work short. That's kind of the new normal, right? And so cross-training has become more and more of an emphasis in our locations because ultimately, we may have a food service worker that we now need to do some prep work, or maybe we need, a cook to go out and act as a server. And so here's the opportunity to open up the floor and provide these cross-training opportunities and make sure that everybody kind of understands what the needs are and help them to learn and adapt to those new roles and those new tasks. So some effective qualities of effective huddles. So you keep them short and focused, 10 to 15 minutes. If you start pushing them out to like an hour long, at that point, it's just a meeting, right? I'm sure by the end of it, you're going to have a couple people with their eyes, getting heavy, and maybe you might hear some snores, right? So important, keep it short, keep it focused, rotate topics. Now, there are going to be fixed topics that you're always going to talk about every single huddle because they have to be talked about, and that's where the consistency comes from. when it comes to standards and so on. But when we're talking about, we might talk about knife skills one day. We might talk about plating standards or customer service or food safety. Oops, sorry about that, or food safety. And so rotate those topics, keep it fresh, make sure that you are giving as much information as you can on those particular topics, but don't let it get stale, because what we want to do is we want to constantly, we want to nourish the idea of learning something new each day. Use the huddle to highlight company standards and company initiatives, engage the team with open-ended questions, and encourage idea sharing. So I can remember in my past life, I had daily huddles every single day, hence daily, and I had them in the morning, I had them in the afternoon. And I would always have the standard huddle. I would have little bits of information I would give. I would always end with a little bit of trivia or a tidbit of information, and then I would always open up the floor. And sometimes it would be maybe less than productive, but guess what? It was still important to make sure that they got their questions in. And then most times, though, it would be very productive. And I would learn a lot about the moment. I would learn a lot about the staff, and it would help inform how I manage moving forward. And then end with some type of motivational message or a challenge for the day. And from there, you can get creative. It could be a quote, something as simple as a quote, or it could be a very simple challenge that you know that we'll be able to achieve, and it really gives the team members a sense of accomplishment. So this is just a sample huddle form. This is something that my company uses. It's very important to specify that this is just what we use. Every single form is going to look different. Every company is going to have a different process on how they want to, put the information out there. But this is just one idea, right? So we talk about safety. If there were any near misses, completely satisfied, which is basically a focus on customer service. A little area for fun facts. Possible equipment updates if you've got something that's down. I worked at one place where our steamer was down for about 6 months. That was a conversation that we always had to have. Area for recognition, area for announcements. You talk about the menu, talk about what's available, what's not available, any potential specials, those kinds of things. And so that moves us on to the next piece here, which is training. Because as we give all this information and as we discuss standards and what the expectation is, and we have this continuous open dialogue, how do we make sure that our folks are prepared to execute on any of this? And so this is where training comes in. And multi-tiered means a couple different things to me, right? So multi-tiered is progressive. So you want to be able to have, because at the end of the day, you may have an executive chef in your kitchen that is, 20 years into their career, and you may have a utility person that this is their first job. And so you have to have learning that works for both levels and anything in between. And so when I think about, like if you get like monthly safety lessons or learnings that kind of come out, right? And it could be a video, it could be a PowerPoint slide, it could be something you have to mention during a daily huddle. Those are great and those are important because we have to constantly and effectively communicate that out. But that is a singular approach to learning, right? Here's the standard, this is what we need, and here it is, right? Whereas progressive learning or multi-tiered, it's learning that's customized to the person. And so that could be having beginner level training, intermediate, all the way to advanced, right? The other thing is there's different types of folks that come through our locations. And what I've found over the years, what's very interesting, is I've seen basically 3 types of people that kind of come into our locations. The one type of person is the person that kind of fell into it early in their career, and they've just been trapped there. That's what they do. That's what they know. It's what they're comfortable with, and that's just what they do, right? And that's perfectly fine. Then there's folks where it's just a temporary stopover, right? And so they're just doing this until the next best thing comes, or they're working their way through college potentially. Maybe it's just a part-time job, but this isn't necessarily their career. This is just something they do in the interim until something else or whatever it is they're working towards pops up. And then there's the people that chose it, right? This is their career. This is what they decided to do. This is their passion. And they're going to push themselves as far as they can in the career and get up to whatever level they can get up to. Who knows, potentially president one day of a company or something, right? And so how do we apply our training to each of them? And that also is where that multi-tiered approach comes in. So it's progressive learning. It provides opportunities for continuous growth and skill mastery from the very beginner all the way up to the advanced. it's tailored, right? So it meets the staff at their current level and guides them towards advanced competencies. And that's level from beginner to advanced, but that's also, is it a stopover or is it a long-term career for them? And then finally, a very important thing is it does increase retention, right? So what this does is it demonstrates an investment in the team members' professional journeys. Of course, it's beneficial to the department, it's beneficial to the company because we're going to have a well-trained staff, and that's important. But it also helps develop the team members themselves and helps push their career forward. And if you demonstrate that investment in their professional journey, they're going to respond to that and they're going to get that. And it's all about how you develop the training for them and how you apply that training to them. So moving into, this is just some training examples. So completely satisfied. This is an example of a multi-tier training where you have all different kinds of training processes. It could be one-on-ones, it could be videos, it could be written education. There's a lot of ways that you can take this in. And I should mention once again, this is something that Cura uses, and at the risk of it being a Cura commercial, I really just want this in as an example. How a company decides to do their training is ultimately up to them and what works best for the company and for the department. But this is just one good example of how it can work and how it applies across, I would say, a multitude of positions within the department. So something as simple as working on plate presentation. This works for both the server out front, it works for the culinarian, right? The server needs to recognize when a plate looks great, and a culinarian needs to know how to put together a great plate, right? And so this education is a type of education that is front of house as it relates to back of house and vice versa. So, this is where we start to think about things like our standards, our personal standards. Standards are going to vary from location to location, different plating, tray presentations. And then the thing that's kind of important, and this is something that I think is fundamental when we're talking about training, is how do we incorporate these trainings into the patients' lives as they're there, or the residents, the staff that's outside of the food service department, any guests that come in, as well as the client, right, or the administrator of the location. How do we find out how we're doing? And that's where things like rounding comes in, whether it's patient rounding, whether it's leader rounding, and it's full house training, and then using perhaps comment cards or surveys to get really a gauge of how this is working for ultimately the end user, which is our patients and our residents. So some of the training I was talking about is on-site training, right? So this is going to be generally hands-on instruction, right, during daily operations. These are going to generally be focused on foundational skills, like you're going to be thinking about knife techniques, food safety, plating standards, those kind of things. And what's important about this is this builds confidence and reinforces the company's standards, right? These are basic, I would say, almost kitchen 101 items that you're training. But while, like I said, you may have that 20-year veteran, right? You may have people that this is their first job, and this really helps give a foundation, not just for them to be well-trained staff members, but also for their career if they decide to move forward with this and make it something more than just a temporary job, right? Then there's offsite. This is more advanced training. So this is when you start thinking about things that are like regional workshops or culinary intensives or customer care intensives. This would hone advanced skills, things that are beyond the basics of like knife techniques. This could be larger types of things where new techniques come in that you may never use, different cuisines, different industry trends. And what's great about it is there is an opportunity for networking, right, with peers and leaders that are throughout the industry. What I find is, and what I've seen historically, is you have folks that they know everybody in their location. And they're with them for years and years, and they know the techniques they use, they know the cuisine they make, but that's all they kind of know. It's really great to be able to kind of network outside of the location so you can see what's out there and what's possible for your location and what may work, and what may be, an awesome addition to what it is that you're already doing. And then the final piece is, and this is where those folks, the final folks that I talked about, the people that made this a career, right? This is where you really start to think about pursuit of certification. So this is your Serve Safe. This is Ruby training, which is it's an extensive culinary training, as well as food service management training. And this leads you to the credentials through ACF or World Chefs, like a certified executive chef or certified sous chef, and so on. And what's great about this is it recognizes and rewards expertise, right? We're talking about, this is no longer an intermediate person who just kind of started out. This is a person who now has true subject matter expertise, right? So, and it also enhances career progression. So the final piece is it positions team members to be leaders in their field, right? So if it's culinary, it's the culinary field. If it's front of house, then it could be, it could be dining room manager. It could be a patient services manager. It could be any number of things. But ultimately, it positions them to be leaders. And I think that, it's relatively common, but I think that we know that none of us are truly leaders until we actually start developing leaders. And, who knows, through all this, you might have somebody that's a long-term person that may end up moving on one day because of their growth. But that's okay, because what we've done is we've created and developed a person that is an asset to the industry and has been an asset for us in the time that they were with us. So some benefits, just to kind of sum it up, benefits of training for the team is skill enhancement, right? So it empowers our staff to excel at their roles. And if you're looking at cross training, it can help them to excel in roles that they don't normally do. Career advancement. So this opens pathways for promotions and leadership roles. Now it could be within the company that you work for, or it could be another company, or it could be outside somewhere within the company. But either way, it opens that pathway for promotion. And that ultimately is the most important thing. And then the final piece is it creates pride in the team. We're creating a culture of excellence, and they're all a part of it, right? All the team members are a part of it. They share that achievement together, and we're all working toward the same end at that point. So team pride, very important. I can tell you right now, the company I work for, I'm very fortunate to say that I love the company I work for, and I have a lot of pride in what I do and what my team does. And I have a lot of pride in what the site level folks and their teams do. And that's just because we're doing everything we can to create that culture of excellence and shared achievement. So some training standards. So, we could just willy-nilly throw out, right? Well, people need to know how to use a knife, or people need to know how to plate food. But I think it's very important to align those trainings and those lessons with what the company's standards are. And so you have to make a determination as to what those standards are and then align with that. Then you want to make sure that the training is applied effectively, and you do that through those training standards. It does help to maintain consistency and excellence in the kitchens. And ultimately, you need a verifying process that includes a culinary review of standards, right? And this all happens through developing those training standards that are off of the company standards. And so that leads us to what a standards review is and why they're essential. So a standards review is all about assessment. We get a chance to evaluate the current performance of our staff. How well are they adhering to food service standards? We have instant feedback with that. So it helps us to identify those areas of need, and also helps us identify those areas of where we can celebrate those successes. And then finally, through that, it tells us exactly what our training opportunities are, right? So we use these results to inform our training sessions. We target specifically, all right, well, we know that X, Y, or Z is not being executed properly. So let's make sure that we're giving them training on X, Y, and Z. So some benefits, engagement. This is important. I think a lot of people sometimes can fall into the trap of doing some type of audit or review, and they just kind of shuffle through the kitchen, they get their review done, they come back, and then that's it. And I think that what we're missing is the engagement piece. I think that it's a living, breathing process, and we need to involve the team as we're doing these updates. It gives us a moment to spot train. It gives us a moment to say, well, we recognize an area of opportunity. Here's a fantastic way of improving upon that. And then all that does at the end of the day is going to improve that culinary excellence or that food service excellence. It also helps in skill development. So as we're doing that, we identify areas of training, right? What kind of training is needed, and how can we track that over time? So if you were to do an audit and you turns out that nobody's wearing those non-slip shoes, right? We develop a training on it, we provide the resources and the tools, and then a month later we do another audit to verify that. And now everybody's wearing their non-slip shoes. You have a verifiable, quantifiable development and improvement over an area of opportunity. And then the final piece is consistency, right? So this helps to ensure high quality dining experiences, whether it's for residents, guests, patients, the staff, your client, or the administrator of the building. Either way, it ensures a high quality dining experience because it's going to give you consistency. If you do it consistently, you're going to consistently get ahead of any potential issues that are there. And so some effective standards review processes. Like I was saying earlier, you want to define the actual standards, right? So you determine the location's food service standards, and that could be centered around presentation or taste or temperature. You want to align the audits with those expectations and ensure relevance and consistency. So if you have, a set of expectations and you develop an audit that has nothing to do with those expectations, I don't expect that the audit is going to be very successful, right? So you want to make sure it's aligned. Then you develop the audit, right? And so this is a comprehensive review tool based on those defined standards. And so you want to include whatever key areas or pillars that are important to the location. Could be food quality, could be safety, could be menu guidelines or something clinical. And then finally, conduct the review, right? Have regular reviews to maintain accountability. To be frank, if you were to do a single review and then not come back to it for a year and a half, it's not going to do much for you, right? So if you do it monthly and the staff is aware that you do it monthly and they know that there are focus areas that you are concentrating on, you're going to see improvements in that because you're effectively communicating the expectation, you're conducting the review, you're spot training in that moment so that you can help develop that area of improvement, and then you're verifying that it's been improved. And you're doing that consistently. And in the process, you're engaging the team, right? Encourage that transparency and have open dialogue. If there's an expectation that you have and it's not being met, but the team member has, some input as to why it's not being met, listen, hear what they have to say, because there might very well be a reason that we're missing, that it can't be done. And it's very important to hear what they have to say. They do it every day. So that more often than not, they're going to know the reason why. This is just an example review. Once again, this is something that we use. It can be focused or concentrated in any way that you need it to be. But, it's something as simple as safety and sanitation. Safety and sanitation audits, are they being executed at least monthly, right? That's a yes or no question. If they're not, find out the reason why, and then just act upon it. And then what do you do the next time around? When you're doing your audit the following month or whenever it is, you're able to verify that they are now doing their audits monthly, right? Very important. And so the outcome of all this, right? So this is ultimately a motivated, highly skilled culinary team, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to deliver that dining experience that we're trying to provide, right? Whether it's in a hospital or it's in rehabilitation or it's long-term care, it doesn't matter. Either way, we want to provide culinary excellence. And that definition is, I think, completely dependent upon the location. But at the end of the day, we still want to provide what that definition of culinary excellence is. The other thing it does is it does foster long-term loyalty and engagement with the staff. So, and that takes me to the next part of this, which is recognition and engagement. So recognition ultimately improves engagement, right? So recognition boosts morale, right? So celebrate the hard work and motivate your team members to excel, all right? And that morale is going to be boosted. It encourages growth. So it fosters a sense of pride in their skill development. It fosters a sense of pride on what they do on a day-to-day basis. And it builds loyalty. So if you demonstrate appreciation for a team member and you help strengthen them, they are going to demonstrate appreciation for the location and for you, and they're going to help strengthen what it is that you're trying to get done. So some of the benefits, right? Motivating excellence inspires the team, right, to continually improve. And ultimately, we want them to take pride in what it is that they're doing. We don't necessarily want them to go through the motions and just kind of get through the day. We want them to actually care about what it is that they're doing. The engagement piece, right? So If we build a positive workplace culture and staff feel valued and they feel that they are seen as a team member, as an employee, they're going to be more engaged with the department. And ultimately, it strengthens team unity. So this is mutual appreciation and collaboration across even interdepartmental as well as within the department itself, right? So what I've seen a lot in the past is culinary is kind of versus the front of house, and front of house is versus this, and there's a lot of silos within a single department. Now that does nothing to provide any standardization. It's not going to provide any kind of food service excellence or culinary excellence. And so we have to do what we can to provide unity. And what that means is our chefs know and fully understand what it is our food service workers do. And they both know what our utility folks do. And we all encourage them to do the best they can. And we all understand that each of us affects our job equally in some way or another. I can remember going back a while when I was an executive chef in a healthcare facility. Whenever the dietitian would come into the kitchen, I would give them the stink eye. And the reason why I would do that is because I assumed that they were there to screw something up that I put together, whatever that was. Now, narrow point of view, of course, I wasn't aware of what a dietitian did because nobody from the management level at these locations took the time to make sure that we each understood our job and took the time to make sure that we each valued, we valued each other and we had a mutual appreciation of what it is that we did. It wasn't until I became a food service director and I had to work directly with a dietitian that I realized how important they are to the food service department. And then once I understood that and I saw all the stuff that has to be done from a clinical perspective just to keep the place running, I got a newfound appreciation and I've respected dietitians deeply ever since. Even more so once I got my CDM because I got a chance to get a little bit of a taste of what it is to see the clinical side, and it's certainly not easy. And so it's that type of thing that needs to happen. We need to understand mutually what it is we do for the department, whether it's high level or it's entry level. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have to value each other and appreciate and collaborate with each other. And so just some statistics very quickly. So employees who receive recognition only a few times a year from leaders. So this is just, every once in a while they may say something that's half decent, but for the most part, they don't really engage too much. They are 5 times as likely to be actively disengaged, which when you read that, it sounds like an oxymoron, but at the end of the day, they are disengaged. They're actively disengaged. There's a good chance they don't really care too much about what's going on in the department. They just want to get through the day and that's it. They're 74% more likely to say that they do not plan to be at the organization in 1 year, which we've already discussed exactly how difficult it is from a staffing perspective post-COVID and all these years later. So that's something that we absolutely don't want to see. We want to see that number shrink as much as possible. And they're 27% more likely to be struggling. And that makes sense. Because if they have questions and they don't necessarily trust you as a leader, they're not going to go to you, right? They're going to try and figure it out on their own, or maybe go to somebody else that doesn't necessarily have the right information, and they're going to be struggling at their job. And here you go. If somebody's struggling at their job long enough, they're probably not going to want to stay at that job, right? So we have to remove all of these stigmas by just taking the time to recognize them consistently and let them know, hey, you're doing a good job. And this is for folks who actually receive some recognition. Imagine what it's like for the folks that don't receive any. And that unfortunately is a reality for a lot of places, right? The numbers probably go up, exponentially. So something to keep in mind there. I thought it was very interesting. So some everyday recognition strategies. Spot recognition. Acknowledge the outstanding efforts that are going on in that moment. Like, do it right then and there. Give verbal praise, or if you're able to give a small reward of some sort, do that, right? And that's what I talked about a little bit earlier. We could have 100 things going on and 95 of them are perfect. 5 of them might not be going right. Why ignore those 95 things that are going right? Right? Have monthly spotlights. So things like culinarian of the month, or it could be employee of the month. And team meetings or newsletters are great because that can hopefully get the rest of the building involved with it. Have a bulletin board for recognition, maybe a wall of fame or something along those lines with pictures, notes, or achievements. Once again, something that could be visible to all of the building and have the rest of the building engage with those successes as well. This is just an example because I am a culinarian at the end of the day. I am a chef. This is something that we kind of worked on in terms of celebrating our culinarians during the month of July because it is National Culinary Month. But as we know in this industry, there's National Fill in the Blanks Month for just about every position. And so you could still use this structure for just about any role, right? So celebrate it. Actually take the time, dedicate a week to the culinarians. It doesn't have to be an expensive thing. It could be small. You can take it as far as you want or as light as you want, but just show some type of appreciation for them. It could be as simple as personalized thank you notes, right? Small gifts. It could be a guest chef potentially or a guest speaker. It could be team building activities or maybe even a friendly cook-off amongst chefs, those kind of things. And involve the community as much as you can. Highlight the hard work. With any kind of stories or newsletters that you can, perhaps social media if the location has it. Host an open house, showcase culinary talents, or it could be something with customer service. It could be any number of things, right? But get them involved, get the community involved, because the more they're involved, the more they're going to see the successes. And that helps in a couple different ways. Number one, it gives additional confidence and helps to boost the morale of the team member being celebrated. But it also shows that we're very engaged with our staff from the receiving end on like our end users, our patients or our residents. And it really helps to paint I would say, a more positive picture of the department, which can never be a bad thing. So some everyday recognition strategies, once again, personal milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, or additions to families. It doesn't even have to be something they're doing great in the moment. It could just be as quick as wishing them a happy work anniversary or a regular anniversary or a happy birthday. Career milestones, all the way from 90 days up to 25 years. And really, yeah, there's no reason why we shouldn't celebrate 90 days, especially considering what I've mentioned about the world we live in when it comes to inconsistent staffing, right? So 90 days is a milestone, right? But celebrate those 1 years, those 5 years, 10s and 20s and 25s. And, if you can incorporate a peer-to-peer or customer recognition program, right? Let the patients or the residents say thank you, right, to somebody that's done a great job, right? Invite everyone to compliment when the compliments due. There's nothing wrong with that. And there are folks out there that go above and beyond every single day, and it just doesn't get recognized. And it would be great if there was a platform for anyone that receives that great service to let people know, this person did a great job. Right. So the final thing on this is celebrate the entire journey. Right. So as I said earlier, you may have a person that you've helped train and you've engaged with them and they've been a fantastic employee for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and they move on. They go on to the next piece of their career. They're well trained and they're ready to step up. Well, it's always tough, right? But we should have those exit interviews. We should find out, what did we do right? What did we potentially do wrong? How could we have done better? Celebrate both of the sides of the journey. We celebrate when they start. It's okay to celebrate when they leave. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and there are times when you may get an individual that is leaving for all the wrong reasons, right? And that's a little bit of a different story. That said, it's still important to have that exit interview, because a lot of times you'd be surprised that part of the reason why they're leaving is a failure on management's part somewhere down the road. Not everybody's all bad, right? There are folks that might be leaving maybe not on the most positive terms, but it could be something that we failed to notice or something that we could improve upon as leaders and as managers. So it's important, whether it's positive or it's less than positive. I still think it's important for us to do that exit interview and find out how we can improve. Because at the end of the day, it's a nonstop journey to get better and better at what it is that we do. So outcome, I'm going to read this verbatim. It's regular and meaningful recognition creates a motivated, skilled, and loyal team committed to excellence. It's as simple as that. We don't have to get much deeper than that. It's if we want to provide excellence, whether it's culinary excellence, it's customer service excellence, we just need to provide that recognition and be meaningful about it. One of the traps I often find is when we start to see like sports coach recognition, where go team, good job, and not necessarily putting in the moment to, say to them specifically what they're doing well, or what they saw, or what we saw in them that is really great in that moment. Try and keep it as personal as you can when you're giving that recognition. It keeps it more motivational for the individual. And so I'm going to start tying this all together. And one of the important things is improving your regulatory compliance through all of this, right? So and we'll start with this, it's proactive risk identification. So when you're training a person, you're identifying the standard, you're training them, you're following up, and you're making sure you're doing what they're doing well. And when they're doing well, you're recognizing it. When they're missing the mark, you're letting them know constructively. What you're doing is you're proactively identifying risks without actively doing that particular task. You're just naturally doing that, right? You're instead of reacting to a potential major issue that could pop up, you are proactively looking at your department every single day in some way and working with your staff to make sure that you identify any potential issues before they become issues. And because of that, you're now developing ownership. And because folks have that ownership of the location and ownership of their role and their process, you're going to start to see better compliance through that ownership, because they're going to do their job better. And when they do their job better, all right, you're going to get better outcomes. And then the final piece of that ultimately is stronger culture of compliance. Through all of that, what you're doing is you are developing an entire culture where people are doing their job, they're doing it well, they have ownership of the role, they have ownership of the department and the location, they trust in you as a leader, you trust in them as an employee. And it's once again, it comes down to that symbiotic relationship where we all depend on each other. And through that, you're going to get that stronger culture of compliance. So bringing it all together, communication. So through things like daily huddles and different communication tools, we can align our teams to deliver those exceptional outcomes we're looking for, and those different patient-focused dining experiences that we really want. Through the training, you're going to develop those skilled culinarians. They're going to craft those meals that prioritize patients' tastes, preference, and nutritional needs. And at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're going to enhance their experience. You're going to enhance dining satisfaction. You're going to make, and we all know, happy patients, happy residents equals a happy client or administrator of a building equals a happy food service department, right? And once again, we all depend on each other when it comes to that. And then finally, engagement and recognition. So strategies like spot recognition and using things like a national celebratory month, they inspire creativity, and they're going to elevate not just culinary offerings for patients, but they're going to elevate the process for patients. And you're going to get that customer service that you're looking for. You're going to get that experience that you're looking for from your staff. And some takeaways. So exceptional patient dining experience, right? That's what we're aiming for. That's what we want ultimately. We don't want anything less, quite frankly. We want to nourish our connections, and our connections range from our staff members outside of our department, our clients, our administrators, our guests, our residents, everybody. We nourish our connections, and we do that through all of the processes mentioned. We enhance the quality of life for our patients. Food is, generally speaking, for most folks, when they're in a situation where they have to be in a hospital or a rehabilitation location or long-term care, food tends to be the highlight of the day, or at the very minimum, should be the highlight of the day. And so we have to do what we can to enhance the quality of life for our patients. And then the final piece, in doing all of this, naturally will improve regulatory compliance, because what you're doing is you are developing a well-trained staff. You're developing a culture of transparency where people understand the whys, and they understand the importance of doing a great job from day to day. And that is the presentation. And I do apologize in advance before we go into the questions area. The setup is unique the way I am right now, and I can't really see the screen with the questions. So that said, I'm going to minimize my screen very quickly, and I'm going to see if there are some questions in the question board, and we can kind of go from there.
So John, I can help you with that.
Excellent.
So Melinda Thompson from ISSI said she's very interested in the tent cards. So if that's something that you can share, Melinda, would you mind sharing your email possibly, or taking down John's email and we'll make sure you get what you're after there. And thanks very much, John, for providing this education.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
again, thank you. Type your questions using the question pane, identify the name of your organization, and it looks like we've had another. Oh, Melinda gave her email. So John, will you capture that, please?
Absolutely, yes. I will make sure that I will get some information out to you, 100%.
Super. I've got another question. Kendall in Iowa. So how was your survey experience during work in the kitchen, and what were your takeaways?
Well, what I found is, and it's dependent upon, the surveyor, ultimately what regulatory party is coming out. But what I've found, and I've seen kitchens where we've had exactly what I've just talked about, where we had this fantastic culture. I've seen some that were in the process of getting there and they weren't quite there yet. And what I've noticed is you get a much friendlier experience, a much easier experience, for lack of a better term, when you're prepared in a way that this process helps to prepare you to be. Right. And so when you are doing everything you can to identify those risks before they become a concern, when you are consistently training, when you are consistently engaging with your staff, and they understand the whys and they understand exactly what the processes are, more often than not, I've found success. I've found success. It's very important, I think, to recognize and understand that as a regulatory agency comes in and they do their inspection, they're going in with no preconceived notions. What they're going in with is just the earnest desire to go in and make sure that we, as a location, we are doing exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing. And so focus on that. Focus on that. What are the needs? What are the needs based off of previous surveys? What are based off of the audits that you do, the consistent reviews that you do? What are the needs, and how can you make sure that when you do get this regulatory agency in, how can you make sure that you're answering their questions and you're satisfying their potential concerns before they actually become concerns? So I would say that when I practice and when I see in practice these particular things, when we have a very engaged, leadership and an engaged staff, the potential for success during any kind of surveys, it just goes up exponentially. So it's very important to make sure that you have that engagement and that you have those processes in place.
Okay, super. So Anthony Perry from Exalt Health Rehabilitation in Wildwood, Florida said, thank you for the great information.
Sure.
Valerie Hayes of Bridgepoint National Harborside in DC would like you to speak on the tent cards again. And Valerie, I will send you the slides, so don't worry about that.
Yep.
And she would also like the tent cards.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we've got one more question from Kevin in Pennsylvania. And he wants to know, what sort of hospitals does Cura work in?
Well, they're all private owned. We have some systems that are very large. We have a very large system in Pennsylvania. We also have a decent size system down in the South in Mississippi area. We also have multiple in Texas, and then a bunch that kind of branch all throughout the Midwest and the leading up into the Northeast area. So, and also some in Philadelphia as well. And we have some that are, I'll tell you right now, they serve 8 patients a day. 8 patients. We actually have one particular location that only has 4 patients currently, but their presence is known in the community. So they do 1,500 covers a day for the community because it's such a small community. There's no restaurants. There's nowhere to go for them to eat. And so they actually rely on the hospital, and that's where they get their food. And it's actually fantastic food. It's at a very good price. And so we have everything and everything in between. So we have some very large hospitals that are urban, and then we have very, very small ones that are what I would call community magnets, and really do a fantastic job working for the community.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much, John, and great timing. You're 30 seconds away from the 1 o'clock hour.
There it is.
Yes, and Melinda, yes, I'll send the slides and I'll copy you, John, so that you have an introduction to these ladies, and they've got yours. Well, thanks everyone. Watch for this on the CIHQ partner page, and hopefully we'll see you at the summit in just a short couple of months.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Have a
great
great day,
day.
everyone. Yes, thank you. Yes, Carlos, I will get you the slides as well. And I'll just hang on here in case anyone else needs these. I'm going to mute because my RoboVac is in the background.
I can hang on for a few more moments, make sure that everything's good.
All right, John, it looks like the numbers are diminishing. Have a great afternoon, sir.
All right, thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.